A moment ago, in a smaller gathering, I read one piece of text from the Talmud, and if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to read a companion piece. Tana Rabbanan. We have a following tradition. Maaseh Rebbe Yochanan ben Broka, the Rebbe Elazar. There's a story about Rebbe Yochanan and Rebbe Elazar. The Rebbe Elazar, Chisma Shahachu Lakabel Pnei Rebbe Yeshua Bepekian. These three students, no slouches whatsoever, went to go see their beloved teacher, Rebbe Yoshua, in the village of Pekin. Amar Lahem, upon greeting them, said the teacher to the students, Ma chidush haya bebeit hamedrash. What new was said earlier in the study hall? Ma chidush haya bebeit hamedrash hayom. Amru lo, they reported back to him. Talmidecha anu. We're not rude. We're your students. Talmidecha anu. Umeimecha anu shotin. We thirst from your waters. Far be it from us to introduce a new idea. You're the master. Amar lahem, said Rebbe Yeshua to his three principal students, Af al pichen, even so, efshar lebeit hamedrash below chiddush. He's nodding. The record states, Professor Wachs is nodding. It's impossible to have a dialogue in learning that is completely frontal. We do not, in Torah study, rehearse the old. We leverage a tradition to bring forth the new. He's still nodding. I'm on a roll. For Saul and Diane to be here today, for all of you to be here today, to celebrate a tradition that only makes sense with chidush, or where I come from, chiddush. The synergies that we're about to experience today are a sacred experience. I want to thank a number of people. First and foremost, our board chair, Dave Brower, our board members who are here today. See all of you here. It's wonderful that it's not just in Zoom boxes. People with their resources, with their networks, made this chair possible. And all of you, staff, friends, students, for understanding the import that what did we learn in the Beit Midrash Hayom? We learned about tradition and we learned about chidush. Two people made tonight very, very possible. The co-chairs of the Wachs campaign, Jonathan Levin and Louis Hock, they tolerated me. They still talk to me. And they did so out of deep devotion. Each one will likely speak about how they first encountered our teacher, Dr. Saul Wachs. They come from very different approaches, but the common bond, which is all of our bond, is understanding that there really is no such thing as Gratz College without a Saul Wachs. And what tonight means is that there will never be a Gratz College without a Dr. Saul Wachs. So I think my job is through. And Louis, if I can invite you to offer some remarks.
So as Zev said, when I was asked to give remarks at this investiture, it was suggested that I explain what prompted me to support the endowment of the Saul Wachs chair. For me, this created a dilemma. How do I stand before a crowd of this size and so many people and explain that Zev hoodwinked me? With an innocuous sounding question about support for Gratz within my synagogue. So I thought about this for a while. Jonathan will tell you that he was eager to hear my speech, and I kept on telling it wasn't written yet. But I finally came up with four reasons just before Shabbat. Um, and here they are, and I'll expand upon them to some extent. Reason one, my relationship with my synagogue. Reason two, what Saul Wachs has meant to someone who did not grow up in Philadelphia. I was asked to give the perspective of someone who's not a Philadelphian, and what that has, what Dr. Wachs has meant in particular, what Saul and his generation have meant to me and my generation, and Saul's lessons for the future. My relationship with my synagogue. I've been a member of Temple Beth Hillel for over 30 years. And depending on the moment that you find me, it's likely or unlikely that you may find me railing about some pronouncement at the synagogue or some policy that is being considered that for whatever reason in my intransigence, I find is not consistent with what I regard as an open and transparent egalitarian congregation where we all stand equally before God. So what does this have to do with Saul Wachs? For much of that time, Saul Wachs has sat across from me in the Temple Beth Hillel sanctuary. Over time, our quick eye contact or greeting on Shabbat or festivals has grown to warm exchanges. I have enjoyed conversations after Kiddush and the warmth and connection that can follow an exchange. For me, Saul has been one of those remarkable teachers who can provide context and perspective that can help me to find a path through my Bamidbar, my wilderness of the moment, and back to Kedusha. At other moments, Saul can be this remarkable anchor that can help to keep you grounded, settled, and connected. Not growing up in Philadelphia. I did not grow up in Philadelphia, and I came of age in Denver. I don't have the perspective of a Jewish community that has the wealth of resources that many who grew up in communities like Philly often do. However, either way, it is easy to get lost in a big city and to feel alone and isolated. I'm also severely asthmatic and have had challenges that come with this disease since I was an infant. As a skinny asthmatic 17-year-old, I was sent out to Denver to be treated at National Jewish Health, which in the mid-20th century was and remains a world-class institution for the treatment of pulmonary disease. While there, I was fortunate to be embraced by physicians at the hospital, by members of the Denver Jewish community and its greater community, whose relationships with me has allowed me to experience professionally and personally in ways that I could have never imagined. This is something that amazes me every day. The people who I have met along the way, like Saul Wachs, who have and continue to enrich my life immeasurably. Often these moments with people like Saul are fleeting, moments that can be gone in a flash, and yet they mean so much and for which I am so incredibly grateful. My experience is not recollections of the old neighborhood in the Northeast or West Philly. For me, it is the joy of a clear, fresh mountain morning in the high country, or the excitement that I still feel when I catch a first glimpse of the mountains as my plane prepares to land in Denver. To see the grandeur and beauty of the Rockies is to be reminded that there is something in this world that is greater than us and connects us. And it is teachers and friends like Saul Wachs who remind us what it means to stand humbly before God and to stand at Sinai. What Saul and his generation have meant to me and my generation. This past year, I had a severe relapse of asthma. What to do confounded my Philly doctors and me, and I was sent back to National Jewish for treatment. To be honest, there were several moments over the last year when I did not expect to survive my pulmonary challenges. I am fortunate to be here and have emerged relatively unscathed for reasons no one understands. But a remarkable thing happened to me while I was experiencing my breathing issues. I had the opportunity to walk around the National Jewish campus and along some paths that I had walked upon 50 years ago. I especially enjoyed revisiting the plaques of donations going back to the early 20th century from Jewish social welfare organizations across the country, where people like my parents, grandparents, and even great-grandmother kept the pushkas on top of the refrigerator to be filled with nickels, dimes, and maybe even a quarter for places like National Jewish, Highest, Jewish Family Services, the Jewish National Fund, just to name a few. Their work and that of people like Saul Wachs have built and chronicled the exceptionalism in American Judaism that has allowed my generation to prosper in ways that other generations of Jews have never known during more than 3,000 years of our history. The most repeated phrase in the Torah is to remember the stranger because we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So we are reminded to shelter the homeless, feed the hungry, heal the sick, remember the widow and orphan, and honor the memory of those we have lost. Important, timeless values that Saul has taught generations of Jewish educators across the United States, who in turn have instructed their charges. It is these steps that were the response to the hate and anti-Semitism of Denver in the early 20th century at the heyday of Ben Stapleton and the Klan and its control of local government. This past Sunday, following a horrific attack on Jews outside of Boulder, Colorado, we were reminded how the lessons of Saul has taught us to remain the beacon of hope that they have always been. But now is our turn to provide for the future as people like Saul have done for us. Now we are here to watch the installation ceremony for a new occupant of the Saul Wachs chair, Brendan Goldman. To him, the baton will now pass, and he will teach generations to follow, much as Saul Wachs has done before him. Together, we will continue our 3,000-year-old journey in search of the Yetzer HaTov and holiness in each of us. Through their instructions, teachers like Saul Wachs and Brendan will continue to remind us what it means to be Jewish. And one last point. By giving me the honor of helping to raise the money for the Wachs chair, I know that I was not hoodwinked by Zev. He is much too smart for that. Zev gave me the opportunity to participate in helping to fund an endowed chair in honor of Dr. Wachs. In so doing, I've been able to comment upon his remarkable legacy and to participate in a wonderful gift of helping to secure future generations of Jewish children to follow, much as Saul Wachs, for generations of Jewish children across the United States who have come of age since the late 1940s. Thank you.
As wonderful and heartening was Lewis's story, you'll see that mine comes, as Zev said, from a different approach, and I think that speaks volumes about Saul's influence in a multitude of ways. I first met Saul Wachs in 1964, my last summer as a camper at Camp Ramah. I was 16 and not really in the mood for ketote, what we call daily classes. After all, this was camp, and though I knew the educational routine well, I much preferred to spend my time in less serious activities. So here comes a tall, lanky man who first tells us that he is an emissary from the Melton program with a new and exciting way to learn Torah. We would study Breshit, Genesis, expecting a rehash of the all too familiar Bible stories. I was dumbstruck when he used the first sentence of Breshit, in the beginning, you can finish the rest, as little more than an off-ramp to delve headlong into the parallel narrative of Enuma Elish, the Babylonian story of creation. To this day, the methodical analysis of Jewish texts Saul taught me that summer stands as an indelible inflection point in my Jewish education. Serendipity brought us together again when we joined Temple Beth Hillel Bethel in 1986 at the urging of Saul's exceptional wife, Barbara, who later became our daughter's most impactful high school teacher at Akiba Hebrew Academy. Not only has Saul been a beloved Moreh, but now, with Diane, also a dear friend to Sharon and me. Most recently, we have embraced a warm and halfway comical tradition. Each Saturday, immediately after services, I grab my tallis bag and Sharon's purse and rush across the sanctuary to Diane, who hands me 2 items, one usually being Saul's ginormous tallis bag. Continuing the relay, I elbow my way into the auditorium through the emerging crowd to claim 4 seats for the kiddish lunch. Needless to say, the conversation with Saul is always the highlight of my Shabbat. As you can see, our fond memories of Saul lead Louis and me to share a reverence for his preeminent Jewish scholarship, pioneering educational leadership, and inspirational Yiddishkeit. Now, please permit me to shift into a more formal mode as we move forward with our ceremonial tribute. A native of Philadelphia, Dr. Saul Philip Wachs received his doctorate in education and Jewish history at The Ohio State University. He holds a Hebrew teacher's diploma from Gratz College and undergraduate and graduate degrees in education, Jewish education, and Jewish music from Temple University, the Jewish Theological Seminary, and the Ohio State University, respectively. Dr. Wachs also has been awarded 2 honorary doctorates, one from JTS in pedagogy, and the other a Doctor of Hebrew Letters from Gratz. In 1975, after 22 years as an education director, teacher, and/or music director at various synagogues, 2 years as an adjunct professor at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and 3 years as an assistant professor of Jewish education at Brandeis University, Dr. Wachs was installed as Dean of Gratz College, serving for 5 years. Also in 1975, and continuing until 2017, he chaired Gratz's Department of Jewish Education, establishing the college's graduate program at the master's level in 1977, and inaugurating the doctorate in Jewish education a quarter century ago. Dr. Wachs is a recipient of the Keter Shem Tov Award of the United Synagogue and the Jewish Educators Assembly Berman House Award for Lifetime Achievement and the Distinguished Alumni Award of the Jewish Theological Seminary. He is a past president of the Association of Institutions of Higher Learning for Jewish Education and has served in numerous other leadership roles in national Jewish educational bodies. The Board of Governors has granted Dr. Wachs the status of Professor Emeritus of Jewish Education. Saul was married for almost 41 years to the late Barbara Edelman Wachs, a prominent Jewish educator, and 3 of their 4 children survive. Since 2000, he has been married to Diane Ruth Cover, former Director of Services for Older Persons of the Jewish Family and Children's Service of Greater Philadelphia. Saul and Diane share 17 American and Israeli grandchildren, plus 1 great-grandchild. And now for the award of the Gratz Medal. Saul, would you please join me? The Gratz Medal was established in 2019 to recognize those who embody the college's commitment to community, leadership, and learning. The medal bears a seal designed for Gratz in 1900 by Catherine M. Cohen, a Jewish American artist from Philadelphia who studied with Thomas Eakins at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and was assistant to Augustus St. Gaudens. She was one of the earliest important women sculptors in the United States. The Gratz Medal therefore carries with it a wonderful legacy and tribute to a most deserving and special person. It is my honor to present the Gratz Medal to Dr. Saul Philip Wachs, Emeritus Professor and member of the Gratz Board of Governors.
After that, if I were smart, I would just say thank you and sit down. But I'm not that smart, and you're not that lucky. Let me begin with Hakarat Hatov. I want to acknowledge the generosity of those who contributed to the establishment of the chair and the attachment of my name to it. It is a singular honor and is much appreciated. I want to acknowledge with gratitude your participation in the investiture, either in person or by Zoom. This includes family and friends from as far away as Israel and those who have traveled a considerable distance to join us this evening. On a personal level, I owe a great deal to my wife, Diane, of a quarter century, who gave up her position at Yale and her circle of friends to join me in Philadelphia. And of course, I want to acknowledge Jonathan and Louis, two wonderfully dedicated people who played a major role. Since my marriage to Diane, I have come to know and love my extended family and to appreciate the warmth of the welcome I have received from all of them, while constantly growing in my appreciation of the children whom Barbara of blessed memory brought into the world, their spouses, the grandchild, and now a great-grandchild. I've been asked to discuss the programs that I helped to establish at Gratz, and I will do so quite briefly. First, a bit of context. When I came to Gratz in 1975 as academic dean and chair of education, Gratz was a very different place than it is today. Its student body included the largest communal supplementary high school, Jewish high school in North America, about 100 students enrolled in a Bachelor of Hebrew Literature program, a robust adult education program, and a small group of students working towards a Master of Arts in Hebrew Literature. The faculty was mixed in stature, and there were no fixed procedures for advancement among faculty. In my first presentation to the faculty, I informed them that given the availability of Jewish studies in local universities, the future viability of the college lay in graduate programs. The response was less than enthusiastic. Some of the faculty in different ways indicated to me that Gratz was more of a home haven than a serious place of learning. This was a major change from the early years of the college. Of course, during those early years, it was the only local institution offering intense preparatory study for those planning for careers in Jewish communal service, the rabbinate, or Jewish academia. Its alumni for many years included world-class scholars and activists. But that was not the situation when I came. In the face of skepticism, and with the support of the president and the board, we forged ahead. instituting graduate programs in Jewish music, Jewish education, Jewish communal service, which brought us a new crop of serious, highly motivated, and capable students, and in the process, changed the climate of the institution. I was asked to share what were the underlying principles that informed the graduate programs we instituted. I will limit myself to three. After Sputnik, in 1957, a reevaluation of American education led to a major change in pedagogical theory. Instead of the traditional model of teaching as telling, the emphasis was placed on inquiry and discovery learning. This is not foreign to traditional Jewish learning. Many pages of the Gemara include the question, Mine Hani Mile. How do we know that this is true? What is the source of your opinion? That question informs a tradition of asking questions that we are all familiar with on Passover at the Seder. The new programs were developed with the principle that the syntactical structure of the courses had to be aligned with the substantive structure. In other words, method had to be aligned with content. Let me illustrate by choosing the field I have studied for many years, Jewish liturgy. The liturgy is a censored text, perhaps the only censored text among the classics of Judaism. Nothing got into the liturgy that did not reflect the majority opinion of the rabbis. To this day, if you want to understand any differences between Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, or modern versions, the place to look is in the liturgy. Because that is what happens, these prayers can be fruitfully analyzed for content, and the most productive way to do that is through inquiry and discovery. One of the ways we implemented this approach was through teaming a Jewish studies specialist and a professor of education. And it was my great pleasure to be teaching with Professor Joseph Davis, who is here tonight, for which I am very honored. In these courses, the students not only learn to appreciate the content, but to learn what kinds of questions are productive in analyzing a text. Another principle that guided us was this: I believe that you cannot come to terms with something as a professional without coming to terms with it as a human being. This means that helping students explore the personal meaning of what they were learning was an important element in the classes. Here, of course, the professors had to model an openness and even a vulnerability that invited students to emulate. The third principle was that the most important influence on the quality of learning and teaching is the extent to which the students feel safe. If they do not feel safe, they cannot learn. This affected classroom climate and the interaction between professors and students. These three principles that I've chosen undergirded and informed the graduate programs established after I came to Gratz in 1975. I continue to believe in their validity and relevance today. Let me conclude with a final word about Gratz. I sincerely believe that Gratz is experiencing a golden age. Its professional and volunteer leadership is superb, and we have been invited to envisage horizons for growth that would have amazed previous generations. And although he will be annoyed with me, I cannot refrain but saying a word about our president, a man who combines a brilliant mind, the ability to communicate, and a sense of Menschlichkeit, of human dignity and human values that is inspiring to me. You'll have to forgive me for that. Now it is time to welcome an important addition to the faculty, Brendan Goldman. I am delighted that the chair that bears my name will be occupied by an impressive academic, and am happy to welcome him as he joins the faculty. Baruch haba.
I am delighted to accept this role as the Dr. Saul P. Wachs Chair of Jewish Life and Learning at Gratz College. I want to first recognize the investment of our community's time and resources that went into establishing this position, including the generous donations of the Jewish leaders whose names are listed on the sheets before you. I also want to acknowledge the tireless efforts of Jonathan Levin and Louis Hawk, who served as co-chairs of the Wachs Chair Fundraising Committee and were consummate hosts when I made my on-campus visit here last summer. Moreover, I want to express my gratitude to our larger community of supporters, including the Schusterman family, a number of whose members are in the audience today. Your sustained support as a community has enabled Gratz to offer the exceptional programming and education that distinguishes us as a college. I would be similarly remiss if I did not acknowledge the Talmid Chacham and Gadol Hador, in whose honor this chair is named, Dr. Saul P. Wachs. To speak with the Jews of Philadelphia about Saul is to hear the accolades of a universally loved and revered figure, a unanimous affection that, as we all know, is alien to the raucous politics of contemporary Jewish communities. As one of his peers, Rabbi Lance Sussman, explains, Saul has served for 4 decades as the intellectual wellspring of the Philadelphia Jewish community, as well as its head usher, who graciously welcomed every new student, faculty, and staff to Gratz. As many of you know, Saul is a font also of Gratz institutional knowledge and local Philadelphia history. I did due diligence and talked to the master about this subject before I wrote relevant parts of my talk for today. Forgive me, I have allergies in Philadelphia now. I am indebted to the vision and leadership of Gratz College President Zev Elif, who entrusted me with the task of returning instruction in Jewish studies to the heart of our college's intellectual vocation. I am humbled by the confidence and support that Zev and Gratz administration, faculty, and staff have demonstrated in supporting me in my work to make this project possible. We've come together today to celebrate the Wachs Chair as a community, but our happiness is tempered by mourning and trepidation. The murders of a young Jewish couple in DC, the terrorism on the streets of Boulder, Colorado, and the arson attack over Passover on this state's Jewish governor are but the most recent manifestations of Jew hatred that have run rampant in this country in the aftermath of the 10/7 massacres in Israel. Our answers to these tragedies must be to recommit ourselves to Gratz's mission of training Jewish leaders empowered with profound knowledge of our people's past and present, leaders who can create robust educational institutions, empower their followers with a love of our tradition and practices, and guide our policymakers to safeguard Jews here in the wider diaspora and in our homeland. Today, I will speak to why current scholars of Jewish studies have largely failed to provide such leadership as a result of their alienation from mainstream Jewish communities and their people's welfare. I'll begin with reflections on my own experiences of this alienation as a scholar of the field. Subsequently, I'll address this troubled relationship's historical roots and the ways that Jewish higher educational institutions like Gratz College have sought for generations to surmount it. Finally, I will outline how Gratz's new PhD program seeks to transcend the divide between the academy and the Jewish community, training a new generation of Jewish communal scholars, empowered with doctoral caliber mastery of Jewish studies, and committed to using Jewish wisdom in the service of the Jewish people. My path to becoming a Jewish studies scholar might seem unsurprising as the son of 2 academics, both of whom are here today, academic psychiatrist and an economist, and the brother of a now rabbi who is somewhere back there, whose social world was rooted from childhood in a relatively small Jewish community where we were reared on a love of our tradition and our people. But the hostility I experienced in academic context towards Jews, Judaism, and Israel almost convinced me on multiple occasions to abandon my academic pursuits. But before I get to those particular challenges, let me tell you a little bit about my journey to the field. When I was 18 years old, I left my hometown of Oak Park, Illinois, just outside Chicago, and spent a gap year in Israel with Young Judea Year course. I volunteered with Mizrahi communities, Jewish emigres to Israel from the Arab world, at an agricultural school and a home for people with intellectual disabilities. The relationships I forged in Bat Yam and my love of Mizrahi Shabbat food inculcated my passion for the history of the Jews of the Islamic world, a subject that I have pursued ever since. After my gap year in Israel, I came to NYU as an undergraduate seeking to major in Middle Eastern and Islamic studies, eager to understand the cultural context and history of the people with whom I had lived in Israel. I was taking Arabic and Mandarin my freshman year when my academic mentor, Professor Phil Lieberman, convinced me to drop Chinese for Judeo-Arabic and introduced me to the remarkable documents of the Cairo Geniza. Thousands of personal letters, shopping lists, court deeds, and other ephemera of daily life that had survived by pure serendipity in the storage room for over a millennium in the storage room of an Egyptian synagogue. I knew what I wanted to do with my life. Tell the stories of these everyday Jews whose humanity still resonates in the Geniza texts thousands of years after their passing. Or, as my friend Professor Jennifer Grayson would say, I sought to become a gossip columnist of the Jewish Middle Ages. In the pursuit of that end, I went on to Torah study at Pardes Institute in Jerusalem, Arabic study at a language institute in Fez, Morocco, where I got to know the last Jews of that ancient city, and ultimately to pursue and complete a PhD in history under this generation's doyen of Cairo Geniza studies, Dr. Marina Rusto. I then accepted a research postdoctoral fellowship at Princeton University, where I taught, actually because I couldn't, Princeton doesn't believe in their research postdocs teaching students, it's beneath them. So I went on and I decided instead to teach incarcerated students at Northern State Prison in Newark, an experience that inspired my second book project on incarcerated Jews and the economic marginalization of non-Muslim communities in the Islamic Mediterranean. I continued to pursue this project as the Hazel D. Cole postdoctoral fellow at the University of Washington, where I was ultimately offered the associate directorship of the university's Jewish Studies Center, a position that I occupied until I felt compelled to resign in the face of on-campus anti-Semitism and intransigent administrative indifference to anti-Jewish hate in the aftermath of 10/7. That brings us up to the serendipitous moment a year ago when I discovered the posting for this position at Gratz College. What this brief biography includes is that the anti-Semitism that I witnessed at University of Washington after 10/7 did not surprise me. It was but the most blatant manifestation of anti-Jewish hostility and indifference to it from many Jewish studies scholars that had become all too familiar to me over the years of my training. When I became a Jewish studies scholar and historian, I expected my peers in the field to have similar motivations to study Jews that I did, namely a love for their subject of study, the Jewish people, and a commitment to applying lessons of the Jewish past to enriching the Jewish present. I found many mentors and peers who did indeed share these values. Their number, however, was eclipsed by scholars motivated to study Jews and Judaism to challenge what they called Jewish communal myths, like the belief in Jewish peoplehood, the infallibility of Israel, and the unique value of Jewish faith and practice. I embrace critical scholarship and its capacity to challenge entrenched notions that should be reformed. But my friends and colleagues in other fields of ethnic studies, Black and Africana studies, Hispanic and Chicano studies, or even Balkan studies, came to criticize their subjects' beliefs from a place of love and empathy for the people and civilizations they studied. Only in Jewish studies was such criticism openly rooted in indifference to or even disdain for the welfare of those modern-day subjects. How did this disdain manifest? During my time at University of Washington, senior Jewish studies colleagues asked me no fewer than 3 times to sign petitions that said that they were called, that they, meaning the people sending me the petitions, were called as, quote, leaders of the field of Jewish studies to condemn Israel as a colonial settler state built on, quote, Jewish supremacism. I was sent no petitions indicating that leaders of our field should be called to condemn anti-Semitism, to care about the welfare of the Jewish community. On the contrary, when the school's students protested acts of anti-Semitism they had experienced, these are undergraduates, on their campuses, Jewish studies scholars responded by dismissing their students' experiences on the pages of the Seattle Times. Ironically, several of these professors hold chairs endowed by Seattle's generous Jewish community, donors who supported Jewish studies at University of Washington to enhance Jewish identity and combat anti-Semitism. One of the main reasons I resigned my position as associate director was that I could no longer in good conscience ask donors who shared my values to fund the university's Jewish studies program when the beneficiaries of those funds were hostile to the interests of the Jewish community. Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'zeh, said the rabbis of the Talmud, our scholars of old. All of Israel are responsible for one another. Many of their modern progeny feel no such obligation to lead, guide, or enrich our people. Their Jewish studies has no service to offer living Jews. Now, I wish I could say such indifference or hostility among Jewish studies scholars to Judaism and Jewish welfare is limited to University of Washington or a few other institutions of higher learning. In truth, it has become endemic to even the field's largest institutions. An Orthodox Jewish female colleague of mine, a giant in her field who wears a wig and dresses traditionally, recently noted that the Conference of the Association for Jewish Studies, the largest organization by far in our discipline, is the only academic research space where she has ever felt stereotyped and othered as an Orthodox Jew. How did we get to a point where hostility to Judaism and the Jewish state and the rejection of the very notion of Jewish peoplehood are tenets of a field dedicated to the study of Am Yisrael? How can we conceive of Jewish studies as a field that celebrates Jewish wisdom and tradition rather than denigrates it? How can Jewish studies scholars approach their subjects with ahavat Yisrael, a love of the Jewish people, not sinat Yisrael, that is, antipathy to Jews based on some sort of childhood Hebrew school trauma? In some sense, both the quagmire of today's Jewish studies and its possible resolutions can be traced to the field's genesis in mid-19th century Germany. They're the founders of the discipline, scholars of the so-called Wissenschaft des Judentum, or science of Judaism, included many of the luminaries of the Reform and proto-conservative movements. What united the Wissenschaft project was a commitment to apologetics, a program to justify European Jews' emancipation from discriminatory legislation by elucidating Jews and Judaism's contributions to non-Jewish society. Their ultimate goal was to make Judaism and Jews more palatable to Jews' Christians' neighbors and the statesmen in whose hands those Jews' fate lay. In the service of demonstrating Jews' value to civilization, Wissenschaft scholars produced timeless works identifying how Jesus and Paul drew on rabbinic homiletics, how Muhammad adapted parts of the Talmud and the Quran, and how the Jewish sages of medieval Iberia brought the Greek sciences to Christian thinkers, ultimately providing the foundations of the European Enlightenment. We can understand why the founders of Jewish studies engaged in apologetics. How could they have done otherwise when they and their people faced existential threats from Christians who dismissed their value as citizens? Unlike many Jewish studies scholars today, their arguments were crafted at least to further the welfare of their people. However, in the service of apologetics, some of these scholars implicated Jewish studies in an assimilationist project that denationalized Judaism as a mere religion. That is, that rejected Jewish peoplehood, that proclaimed the notion of exile, of galut, and of attachment to the land of Israel were antiquated concepts. Moreover, as the great 20th century scholar Gershom Scholem wrote, Wissenschaft scholarship treated Judaism as a dead tradition in need of a quote-unquote decent burial, not a vibrant living tradition that should be celebrated and reinvigorated. The Wissenschaft scholars' biases were those of their age, ones that many of their modern inheritors somehow still bear. A secularist triumphalism that saw religion, and that was indeed all Judaism was to them, on an inevitable and inexorable decline. But if the Wissenschaft planted the seeds of many of modern-day Jewish studies pathologies, it also included on its fringes and inspired among its opponents scholars and works of scholarship that utilize study of Jews and Judaism to strengthen the foundations of the Jewish community and bolster its shared beliefs and values. Two towering figures of the age of the Wissenschaft, Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch, founder of Neo or Proto-Modern Orthodox Judaism, and Rabbi Zacharias Frankel, founder of Positive Historical or Proto-Conservative Judaism, embody the positive contributions of the nascent study of academic Judaism. While both rabbis rejected the assimilationist project of the Wissenschaft, they used the Wissenschaft's critical methods in their debates with each other and their antagonists and sought to revive among their contemporary Jewish communal institutions, those institutions' functionality in light of their discovery from the Jewish past. Over the subsequent decades, religious Zionist thinkers in Israel similarly embraced critical historical methodology in their approaches to rabbinic works, rejecting the notions that such methodology implied a relativist ideology vis-a-vis the sanctity of these texts. In our own day, historicizing Tanakh, Talmud, and rabbinic commentaries has become standard practice, that is, contextualizing the meaning of those texts in their own times, has become standard practice at yeshivot, spanning the centrist Orthodox to Reform movements. But what of Jewish studies and higher education institutions outside of yeshivot? Now, Wissenschaft scholars were systematically barred as Jews from teaching at European secular universities. It wasn't until the 1930s that my academic great-grandfather, Saul Baron, would claim the first Jewish history chair in the United States at Columbia University. Before then, Jews had to establish their own colleges for Jewish higher education, which is where our own institution, of course, Gratz College, enters the story. Many of you know this story better than I do. As I said, I talked to Saul about this before I gave this talk, but it bears retelling briefly here in the context of the present conversation. Gratz College was founded in 1895 to fulfill the desire of the Jews of Philadelphia to provide high-quality Hebrew language and religious instruction to their children. That is, the practical application of Jewish studies wisdom. From its inception, Gratz embraced tolerance in service of this mission, accepting female candidates to its teachers' programs and welcoming students from across the movements of Klal Yisrael, the entirety of the Jewish people, as the oldest non-denominational educational institution on this continent. Gratz's leaders recognized the importance of academic Jewish studies to the project of strengthening Philadelphia's community even before Gratz became a degree-granting institution in the field, allying Gratz with the better-funded Gratz College until Gratz's merger with the Hebrew Education Society in 1928. From the 1960s, Gratz established itself as a center of Jewish higher education, granting undergraduate and graduate degrees in Jewish studies, Jewish music, and Jewish communal service. Moreover, Gratz affirmed its commitment to the teaching of young people through the Jewish Community High School, which became the largest supplementary institution for Jewish instruction in the United States and provided instruction for many of the people in our audience today. After Israel's triumph in the 1967 Six-Day War, American Jews endowed hundreds of chairs in Jewish studies at secular institutions across the United States. This investment returned robust Jewish studies programs at countless non-Jewish universities. As a result, many American Jews came to question the necessity of investing in Jewish colleges like Gratz as homes for the field of Jewish studies. Consequently, several small Jewish colleges closed. In response, Gratz doubled down on its investment in education, opening its MED program to wider audiences in 2001. Now, the past 2 decades have clearly revealed that the obituary for Jewish colleges and their role in the field of Jewish studies was delivered far too soon. From the 2010s, Gratz College has taken the lead in education to confront Jew hatred. Our MA and PhD programs in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, as well as in anti-Semitism studies, now under the leadership of my colleague Eyal Feinberg, have trained hundreds of scholars empowered to challenge Jew hatred as it manifests across our land. While Gratz's commitment to Jewish studies has never wavered, the number of Gratz students engaged in the field did drop over the past 2 decades. However, that decline was reversed this May with the admission of 34 remarkable students to Gratz's new executive PhD in Jewish Studies program. Now, when President Elif asked me to establish the executive PhD in Jewish Studies, I had my doubts about how many qualified candidates we would receive. Did not doubt our resources. Thanks to the generous support of the Waldler Foundation and our alumnus, Gene Hoffman, I knew we could offer a top-tier program and support a specific cohort of Orthodox female Jewish leaders. But what type of people would be willing to invest the time and effort necessary to achieve doctoral caliber skills, not to find, what are in all fairness largely non-existent, tenure-track jobs, but to elevate their Jewish communal leadership? The response we received was overwhelming. I have still not recovered from my shock at the caliber of applicants interested in this program, nor the scores of hours necessary to interview them. The cohort includes Americans from the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Heartland, Israelis of birth and choice, rabbis of every denomination, think tank leaders, heads of day schools, yeshivot, and seminaries, policymakers, nonprofit CEOs, psychologists, librarians, and halachic advisors. Their interests span Tanakh, rabbinics, gender and Jewish leadership, Eastern European Jewish life, Jewish education, and Black Jewish relations. Their backgrounds, beliefs, and political views similarly reflect the breadth of the Jewish world. But they are united in their love of Judaism and the Jewish people and their desire to master Jewish wisdom in service of their community's welfare. I want to recognize 2 of those students who have joined us tonight, and actually Rachel also, since I did not know Rachel would be here, but a third is also with us. Sandra Lilienthal and Rabbi Alex Milanek. Dr. Lilienthal is a Brazilian American daughter of Holocaust survivors who has served as a Jewish educator for nearly 3 decades and been a pillar of the Gratz community as an executive board member and faculty member. Sandra's current research interests, which are constantly evolving as I tell my students they should, include female commentaries on the Tanakh and examining the concept of sisterhood in the Hebrew Bible. And I know those have actually already changed also since our last conversation. Forgive me. Rabbi Milanik is a newly minted Reconstructionist rabbi who is the assistant director of religious and spiritual life and Hill director at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. They are interested in 20th century Jewish thought, especially in the Reconstructionist and conservative movements and the experience of Jews of choice. And Rachel Sazer's also joined us here, and I can now speak off the cuff somewhat, who's done remarkable work already for a master's thesis on Black-Jewish relations in Chicago, and will continue to wow us in all of her future research pursuits in their many forms. Thank you for joining us today. My students, as you can see from that small selection, are committed to enriching the Jewish educational landscape through their research while elevating their instruction in college and adult education contexts. And I should also say for grade schools and high school students as well. Their training and goals embody the marriage of Jewish wisdom and Jewish communal welfare that has been the hallmark of Gratz College since its inception. Now, Dr. Saul Wachs spent his professional career committed to those particular values. It is my honor to take the torch from Saul and carry on his vision in establishing our new PhD program and reviving our MA in Jewish Studies and MA in Jewish Professional Studies in partnership with my colleagues here. We live in a precarious moment for our people, but also a moment of great opportunity. Gratz's history as a cornerstone of Philadelphia's Jewish life is proof of the value academic Jewish studies can have to the Jewish world when it's married with a commitment to Jewish communal welfare. Gratz's past achievements have only been possible because of that is our community's support. In a decade's time, I see a cadre of Gratz-trained Jewish studies, Holocaust and genocide studies, and anti-Semitism studies scholars, reinvigorating our Jewish communal life and institutions and combating the disease of Jew hatred that has spread across our land. With your sustained and generous support, we can reshape the landscape of Jewish communal leadership for the better for generations to come. Thank you.